watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 136, using XPages with Bootstrap 3 and FontAwesome. It's not a local resource, it's a delivery. Okay, in this show, Tim Tripcony comes back, and if you're watching this live or semi-live with me, this is his fourth show this week. So it really was a Tim Tripcony week, and I can't thank him enough for all his contributions to the show. He's always been a good friend of the show, and he's a great developer. And I've said this for all week, and I'm going to say it again. You can see his information on Stack Overflow. He just provides a ton of great answers to your questions. He works at bestmethods.com, and you can hire him and bring him to your site for I guess pretty much whatever you want to do that's at least related to XPages. Maybe he does Windows, I'm not sure. But he certainly does custom development. He does great mentoring. He does a lot with the mobile space. So if you're working on a mobile app, he can do that too. So feel free to ring him up if you need some expert assistance. Okay, today we're going to talk mostly about Bootstrap. And before we get into the demo, I've got this slide that I've modified a little bit. But Bootstrap, if you're living under a rock, is a UI and kind of a JavaScript framework based together. And there's so many websites that are based out of it. It came from this group at Twitter, I believe. But there's so many resources out there. You can go to Stack Overflow and ask questions. There's really good documentation about it. So if you don't want to use one UI, Bootstrap is probably a good place you want to be. Now, there's a lot of Bootstrap going on in the XPages space right now. On OpenNTF, there's a great project, Bootstrap for XPages, that Phil Ryan contributed. And what that is, it's kind of like a way to theme the application layout control. So you can still use the layout control and all its goodness there, but you can theme it with a Bootstrap look and feel. And actually, Phil Ryan is going to have an IBM Connect session with Mark Lusink, I believe, going over just how to do that, and I guess whatever is new for this project. Oliver Buss has a Bootstrap UI template kit out there. Mark Lusink, who's part of that presentation with Phil, he's got a great website and demo file at bootstrap4xpages.com. So there's a lot of good examples there, and I highly recommend you check that out as well, especially if you want to kind of do it piecemeal and not involve the application layout control. Steve Zavaki, I believe he's going to be at IBM Connect as well, so you can always seek him out. But he's had some good posts on Bootstrap, as had Henning Schmidt and Kathy Brown. And I think Marky Roden did a couple really good Bootstrap posts on the modal control and maybe a few others and stuff like that. And of course, there's a lot of other people talking about Bootstrap as well. So it's out there. It is being used. But one thing all these people are doing, it seems, at least so far, is they're still using Bootstrap 2. Or probably 2.32 or whatever the last version of 2 is, and they changed Bootstrap from 2 to 3, and it is honestly quite different. There's a lot of different terminology in there. It is not an easy upgrade. You got to change your code because a lot of the class names have changed. Bootstrap 3 is more mobile or responsive friendly, I guess. It's mobile first philosophy, so it's really kind of built in to be able to take advantage of that. So this video that Tim's going to do is actually at least the first video that I know of that just kind of deals with XPages and Bootstrap 3. And what he's going to do today is just pretty much show you how to install it and get going. It's going to be a little less about how to use Bootstrap in your grid and stuff like that, and this is more about how to get up and going quickly by bringing Bootstrap down from a content delivery network and skinning Bootstrap a bit with some different colors and things like that with the use of themes. And I'm just looking at the themes that Tim uses in here, should be an eye-opener, because I know I don't use themes enough. And I want to now after seeing this video. So with all that being said, let's go to the demo.
Hello. In this video, we're going to take a look at how you can very rapidly start developing interfaces that look modern and impressive to users and are mobile friendly with very little invested time or effort. The primary framework at work in the user interface that you're seeing here is known as Bootstrap. So the first step in rapidly coming up to speed on this is going out to the officially recommended CDN, stands for Content Delivery Network, the recommended CDN for not only Bootstrap, but a couple other projects. And so that's just bootstrapcdn.com. And you want to grab onto these two URLs right here. Now let's take a look at some themes in the application that produced the interface that we had up in the browser. If we go to the XSP properties, we see that we've designated an application-specific theme here. So let's take a look at what that includes. Now, in this case, we're specifying a couple property overrides, but those are sort of not pertinent to what we're looking at here. This theme, this application-specific theme, inherits this Bootstrap Slate theme. And we'll actually take a look at that in a moment. But this one, in turn, inherits from the Bootstrap theme, which in turn inherits from FontAwesome. And then that's sort of the root. That's all that's sort of the bottom of the stack there. So what is FontAwesome? Well, FontAwesome is an iconography library where icons are actually delivered as a web font. So if you remember webdings or wingdings, it's actually kind of the same principle behind FontAwesome, in that each of these are actually, they're characters. These aren't graphics. At least they're treated as characters by the browser. So as a result, we can zoom way in, and you sort of have infinite scalability without pixelation, which is pretty cool. So what that allows you to do in your interface then is, without having to have graphics in your own app, you can just pull in this one CSS file, and then you can very easily add icons to your interface. So in this case, in the FontAwesome theme, all we're doing is designating a style sheet resource, and we're pointing it to the CDN URL. Now, you'll notice that on the CDN, it doesn't list the protocol, because the right way to do things now in resources like style sheets and script libraries is to not specify a protocol. And so as a result, then the browser doesn't care whether you're hitting port 80 or it's SSL. It's going to say just inherit whatever the Pages protocol is to go out to this URL. Unfortunately, in themes, if you do just the slashes, then it thinks that's at the root of the NSF, so it gets a little confused. So keep that in mind. If you're going to be using this with SSL, you'll probably need to explicitly specify the SSL protocol here. So by virtue of the fact that this theme extends via multiple layers FontAwesome, we can then, in our XPage, do things like anytime I want an icon, I can just use a pass-through I tag and give it a class of FA, that's short for FontAwesome. And in this case, I've chosen to go with a slightly larger incarnation of this icon, and then the shorthand for which icon I want it to be. So as a result, then, we've got pencil here and trash, and those in my interface turn into these. So rather than actually having text on my link components, I just put an I tag inside them, and then these become iconified. And on the FontAwesome site, you can basically just look and see what all the options are that are available. And as you can see, there are quite a few. Now, the Bootstrap theme pulls in FontAwesome, as was previously mentioned. And there are several things that we need to do here. If we go back to our CDN page, to our quick start here, there's there's the base CSS and JavaScript for Bootstrap. And so we've pulled that in here with a style sheet reference and a script reference. So here's the CSS, and here's the JS. Now in between, you'll see that we're also pulling in jQuery. This is also pointing to a CDN. If you don't pull in jQuery, then a lot of the effects associated with Bootstrap will not fire correctly. And at first glance, you won't know that's broken because all of the CSS will render just fine. But to see an example of that, now we could either resize the browser to get it to look like a mobile interface, or we can actually just zoom in. And at some point, there we go. Now, the available screen real estate by virtue of zooming in has shrunk enough that it says, oh, it's not appropriate to render a landscape mode anymore. Let's render a portrait mode. So now you can see that all of the stuff that was on the right has just dropped underneath what was on the left. And we had a sort of an action button up here, but now this is kind of a collapsible menu. So if I click on it, we get sort of an animated transition there. Now, if I wasn't pulling in the jQuery, this button wouldn't be broken. Anyway, let's reset that. And then the other thing that we're doing here is in the theme, specifying that every page should also, in addition to these resources, include a meta tag that establishes some viewport properties. And this is what actually helps to facilitate that automatic reformatting for us, to where I can write one set of code and simply not care anymore how my users choose to use the app, whether it be desktop browser, a mobile device, or even the Notes client if we're supporting the Xpaint mode. In addition to these resources, we want to set a couple of default control properties. So we want all command buttons to have a style class of BTN. So for instance, if we go back to the X page here, and we've got a button here, then I can indicate in the style class on this button that I want it to be the green button. This is a Bootstrap CSS class. And also that I want it to sort of float to the right. But I don't have to add the base class of BTN because the theme pulls that in on all of them. And similarly, then, now in this case, I've given a link a style class of BTN because I don't want all links to look like buttons, but for these links, I do want them to. So these are actually links, but they look like buttons. This actually is a button, but it has a specific connotation, so I use the BTN success. And then a couple other examples of things that we're pulling in automatically are any editable components like input texts, text areas, and so forth. We're automatically giving a style class of form control. And as you get familiar with Bootstrap, you'll discover the structure that you want to have. This notion of a form group with your labels and your editable components inside that. But your editable component needs to have that form control style class to let it know that it should span the full width. But also get the sort of ghosted blue outline and the rounded borders and all of that. Anyway, so you want to have form control on everything, but you don't want to have to specify that on every component. So it's better to just do it at the theme layer. Brad Balasidis has a blog post about this notion as well. Now, one subtlety that I've added is for all of these types of components, I've also specified that the property show read only as disabled should be true. And the reason is, if by default with XPages, if an editable component is actually read only, so if the document's in edit mode, or if panel ACLs, or for whatever reason, this component needs to be read only, then XPages doesn't send a field at all, it just sends a span. And so then any CSS framework that is expecting it to be a field doesn't see a field, and so it wreaks havoc. So if you have show read only as disabled, then it still sends an HTML field, but it sends the attributes that make it disabled, and so it would still have the rounded border, but it would be grayed out, but the width would be correct and all that, so it remains consistent. So that's just something I like to do is on all the editable components. Set an override where show read only is disabled will be passed a value of true. Okay, so on top of the Bootstrap theme, then we also have this notion of boot swatch. Boot swatch, and by the way, in addition to the FontAwesome.io, there's also getbootstrap.com, where you can look at all the documentation on this amazing framework. This really is right now, it's definitely the way to write good-looking apps. Boot swatch is a cool site that basically is just additional CSS files that you can put on top of Bootstrap to give it a custom look and feel. And there's like a dozen of these. So as a result, on the CDN, they actually have a separate URL for each of these. So what I've done is in my app, I've created a separate theme for each of these, and all it is extending Bootstrap and adding a style sheet resource for that specific theme. So right now, we're just extending this boot swatch slate. But if I say change that to Amelia, then instead of this dark and arguably gloomy theme, we get this nice, bright, chipper. Actually, I don't know. I think that's kind of obnoxious, but it's certainly a very different look and feel, and we can, basically change one word in this theme now. By having these in there, we can change one word in a theme file and get a completely different look and feel. So again, I haven't touched the X page at all. I haven't written any fancy new Java code. It's just, I just changed which theme this extends. You can even, if you want to cater to the sort of like Windows 8 crowd, I think it's Cosmo that, it gives you a Metro look and feel. Anyway, so it's literally that easy. In order to take advantage of all this stuff, you really want to get familiar with Bootstrap, especially Bootstrap 3, and understand things like what are containers and rows, and what's this syntax for specifying column widths and stuff like that. But a lot of this is just really simple. So the fact that you take any table, whether it's just pass-through HTML or an XP table, and if you give it a style class of table, then it gives some basic nice borders and such. But if you do, in addition, the table striped, then you automatically get stripy rows, and that just works, right? So anyway, hopefully that gets you excited about how easy it is to really get started with Bootstrap, and not just the base Bootstrap, but dropping in additional subtleties like these custom swatches and FontAwesome.
And that's the demo. I thank you for your time. I thank Tim for coming on and giving all this great information to us. And if you need me for anything, here's my contact information. And I hope to see you at IBM Connect.